What is going on, everyone? I am James Lynch, and this is Early Look, the show where I take a look at an upcoming notable fight. And on today's edition, we're going to take a look at the UFC 279 main event featuring Khamzat Chimaev taking on Nate Diaz. But before I give you my preview and pick, make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Really helps me out here on the channel. And if you hit that notification bell, you do get updates on content that I'm posting on this channel. I try and post on here almost every single day, so this way you won't miss any of the content. And you hit that like button, it's going to help the algorithm, help this channel grow. And those are three easy things you can do before we get into this. Okay, so if you haven't watched the show before, basically I go through both fighters, in this case Khamzat Chimaev, Nate Diaz. I go through stats, I go through intangibles, I go through a lot of stats basically, and then I give you my pick at the very end. We look at the odds, we kind of decide it there. Agree or disagree, let me know at the end of this thing. Make sure you watch the whole thing. Some people don't. Make sure you watch the whole thing, and then we can discuss this in the comments respectfully, and we can discuss who you are picking in this fight. So there we go. It is Khamzat Chimaev, Nate Diaz. I've given my thoughts on this being a worthy main event or not. It is what it is. Two really big names here. And I know this might seem like an obvious pick, but I got to give it its due diligence and go through the stats and take a look at this one. So let's start first with the fact this is going to be taking place at the T-Mobile Arena, so bigger arena, bigger cage, I should say, than the Apex. Of course, why would they ever do this at the Apex? This is going to be taking place on September 10th. The time we're recording this, it is August 2nd, so we got plenty of time before this fight takes place, and going to be taking place at, like I said, the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada. This will be the main event. It's a 5-round fight, and that's interesting because Khamzat Chimaev has never fought in a 5-round fight, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But let's get to both these fighters, and we're going to start first with Khamzat Chimaev. There we go. So Khamzat Chimaev, as you can see there, 11-0. He's got 6 knockouts, 4 submissions, and 1 decision. He's currently 28 years old. He's 6'2" with a 75-inch reach. So he's 9 years younger than Nate Diaz, and he's going to have a 2-inch height advantage. It's actually going to be Nate Diaz with the reach advantage in this fight. And some of the other accolades for Chimaev include the fact that he's a BJJ purple belt. He's currently number 3 in the welterweight rankings right now. He's a 3-time Swedish wrestling national champion. And of course, he comes from the famed gym, the All-Star Training Center, with guys like, Alexander Gustafsson, Iri Latifi, Volkan Ozdemir just signed up there. He's working there now too. So pretty prestigious gym in the world. Some of the other accolades that Chimaev has had in his short UFC career include Fight of the Night, 1 time against Gilbert Burns. That was in his last fight. He's got Performance of the Night bonuses 4 times against John Phillips, Reese McKee, Gerald Meerschaert, and Li Jingliang. He's got the record, a UFC record, for fastest consecutive wins in modern UFC history in 10 days, which is pretty incredible. Maybe we'll see it again. I don't know. And he's also got the record for quickest 3-fight win streak in modern UFC history at just 66 days. He was also awarded the 2020 UFC Debut of the Year. Got some accolades there. Again, a really impressive run for Chimaev so far in his UFC career. Chimaev has fought in multiple weight classes. He's fought 4 times at middleweight. He's had 2 catchweight fights, and he's fought 5 times at welterweight. This is a welterweight fight, so this will be number 6. As you can see there, Chimaev made his amateur debut way back in September of 2017. He made his MMA debut in May of 2018. And check this out. I went back and actually did the math here. Nate Diaz, by the time Khamzat Chimaev had made his professional MMA debut, Nate Diaz already had 30 fights. So as far as experience goes, Nate has that in spades here. He's been in the UFC forever, and when we go through his record, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Chimaev did not make his UFC debut until July of 2020, but again, fought in Brave and fought really good opposition in Brave as well. I'm a very big on the Brave CF promotion over there. As you can see there, Khamzat Chimaev is 5-0 in the UFC with 4 stoppages. He's got 2 notable wins, Li Jingliang, who's ranked at the time, and Gilbert Burns. He also had a wrestling match with Jack Hermansson, but Jack Hermansson's not much of a wrestler in terms of the accolades that Chimaev has, so can't really take too much away from that, other than the fact that Hermansson is a middleweight. And like I mentioned, this will be the first 5-round main event for Khamzat Chimaev. He's only ever fought 3 rounds in the UFC, and like you'd expect, because he doesn't have that many fights, no major injuries here for Chimaev. He did have COVID, but no physical injuries that he's had in his career. The only close fight he had was his last fight, and personally, I didn't think it was that close. I thought Chimaev won. Obviously, it did go to the scorecards, and Burns, looked great in that fight too. But I went back and looked at the media scorecards for that one. That was back at UFC 273 in April of 2022. 17 media members scored the fight for Khamzat Chimaev. Only 1 media member, Sherdog, scored it for Gilbert Burns. So just gives you the idea of how people were scoring that fight. And that's it for Khamzat Chimaev. Again, there's not a lot to talk about there. He's only got 11 fights. Obviously, I mentioned some of the accolades there. Like I said, 3-time Swedish wrestling national champion. A lot of good accolades, but as far as UFC experience goes, not a lot to work with right now, just 5 fights. All right, let's get to his opponent, Nate Diaz. Usually these take a little bit longer, but with Chimaev, doesn't have much to talk about. Diaz will take a while because he's been in the UFC for a very long time. So you see there, Nate Diaz, 20-13 record. He's got 5 knockouts, KOs and TKOs, 11 submissions, and 14 decisions. Nate Diaz is 37 years old. He's 6 feet tall with a 76-inch reach. So again, Chimaev is going to be a little bit taller, but Diaz is going to have the 1-inch reach advantage in this fight. He's got a 76-inch reach compared to Chimaev, who's just got a 75. Now, Nate Diaz probably, well, he's best known for beating Conor McGregor, but he's also known for winning season 5 of The Ultimate Fighter. He defeated Rob Emerson, Corey Hill, rest in peace, Corey, and Gray Maynard. He is tied with Joe Lozon for 3rd most UFC bonus awards with 15 in total. Nate Diaz is a 3rd degree BJJ black belt under Cesar Gracie, and he's also a southpaw in terms of his stance. Couple other stats we'll go through here quickly. He's got fight of the night 8 times against Josh Neer, Clay Guida, Joe Stevenson, Marcus Davis, Donald Cerrone, Michael Johnson, and Conor McGregor. He's got knockout of the night 1 time when he knocked out Gray Maynard. He's got, and I think the second fight, or third fight, I should say. Performance of the night, he's got that 1 time against Conor McGregor. He's got submission of the night 5 times. Alvin Robinson, Kurt Pellegrino, Melvin Gillard, Takanori Gomi, and Jim Miller. He's actually tied with Jim Miller for most submission wins in the UFC lightweight history with 7. He's also tied with Frankie Edgar and he's tied with Frankie Edgar for most fight of the night bonuses in UFC history. It's understandable. Nate Diaz always brings it. That's why he's getting this opportunity, because he is Nate Diaz. He's the exception to the rule. Now, I went back and looked at Nate in terms of the different weight classes he's fought in, and I forgot about a few things. I'm going to point those out right now. So Nate Diaz has had 21 fights at lightweight. That's primarily where he's done most of his work. He's had 3 catchweight fights. Now, one of the catchweight fights was early in his career, and it was a 160-pound catchweight fight, and that was scheduled at 160. However, if you see, Nate Diaz has actually missed weight a few times. I kind of forgot about that. When he fought Rory Markham, and we'll mention that fight in a second here, fight that he ended up winning by TKO, Nate Diaz came in at 177 pounds for a welterweight fight. So he obviously missed weight for that one. That ended up being a 177-pound catchweight fight. And then I also forgot that he missed weight against Rafael dos Anjos. That was a fight where he came in at 160.5 for a 155-pound fight against RDA. He ended up losing that fight. So yeah, he's had 3 catchweight fights that I think people forget about, as far as, if you're looking at the size in this fight. And he's fought 9 times at welterweight. This will be his 10th fight at welterweight. Had a couple earlier welterweight fights, and we'll point those out in a second here. Now, Nate Diaz, as far as his career accolades, he has fought. He never fought at amateur. He went straight into MMA, made his MMA debut in October of 2004. He made his UFC debut in June of 2007. Of course, he had the 3 fights on The Ultimate Fighter, like I mentioned there, Emerson Hill and Gray Maynard. Nate Diaz's record is 15-11. Now, some people might look at that and say that's not a very good record, but you got to see who he's fought. And we're going to go through some of the names here right now. The 15-11 record he has, he's actually got 11 stoppage wins in the UFC, which is pretty remarkable considering the career that he's had. Some notable wins include Melvin Gillard. I included him on here because Melvin at the time was still a pretty solid prospect at the time. He also defeated Donald Cerrone in a very, very key fight. If you remember, there's a lot of build up to that fight. He defeated Cerrone by decision in that fight. Jim Miller submitted Jim Miller in the second round. He also defeated Gray Maynard, knocked him out at the Tough 18 finale. That was a really big fight. Actually, that was the fight that sort of propelled him into that contender status at the time. Also has a win over Michael Johnson in a fight where I think Johnson was, on quite the roll. Actually, was that? Let me just double check this. I was trying to remember if that was off the Poirier win that he had. No, Poirier was after. My bad. Anyways, beat Michael Johnson. That was a good win. And then, of course, the biggest win of his career. The reason we're even talking about this fight, the reason Nate Diaz is still getting big fights at this stage in his career is because of the win at UFC 196 against Conor McGregor. He was an underdog. He came through. He handed Conor McGregor his first UFC loss. Mega fight. And that just boosted his career to superstar level at that point. Diaz had a big fan base prior to that, but him beating Conor, that was the fight that really made him a superstar and built him up even more. So again, Conor McGregor's a win. And then his last win came against Anthony Pettis. That was at UFC 241. Defeated him by decision. Again, I think that was a fight he was being counted out, and he went in there and got it done. Okay, some of his notable losses, you can see it there on the record here. Clay Guida, who at the time was, very good and still sticking around in the UFC. Joe Stevenson, who's another contender in the weight class, lost to him. Lost a split decision to Gray Maynard. We'll talk about this judging in that fight. Dong Young Kim, another fight where we'll talk about the judging. Rory McDonald, remember, sort of ragdolling him. That was again at 170. Lost his title fight against Benson Henderson. I think people forget, he had that title fight against Benson before McGregor. Lost to Bendo there. Lost to Josh Thompson as well. That was the first fight where Nate Diaz had actually been stopped. They actually threw in the towel. It's a head kick and punches. loss, but it was, the first TKO loss in Nate's career. Kind of a weird fight. And Thompson, I know we know him mainly as an analyst now, but he was a pretty good fighter too. Rafael dos Anjos lost to him as well, and then lost to Conor McGregor in the rematch, lost by majority decision, and then of course lost to Masvidal in the BMF title fight, and lost to Leon Edwards most recently. That was last June. If you look at some of his losses, one thing I got to point out, and again, the reason I got to point this out is because of the style matchup here. Diaz loses to a lot of wrestlers. So let's start first. Clay Guida, obviously known for his wrestling. That was the first loss he had in the UFC. He got out-wrestled in that one. Joe Stevenson was a pretty good wrestler too. Lost to him. Gray Maynard lost to him by split. Again, Maynard, great wrestler. Rory McDonald, not mainly known as a wrestler, but he really utilized wrestling in that fight. You could also talk about Benson Henderson. That's all Benson does. In fact, people hated that fight, if you remember. Henderson just basically took down Diaz the whole fight. Diaz was on his back the whole time, wasn't able to do anything. I remember watching that and being kind of frustrated myself, but hey, credit to Benson. He's the champ. I can't remember if Thompson wrestled him. I don't think he did much wrestling. I think he actually just outstruck Diaz in that fight. And then RDA, I know RDA is not really known as a wrestler, but he just kept taking Diaz down and down and down. That's a fight you need to go watch. And I think, before obviously I give my pick here, people always wondering why the line is so wide, or maybe why Diaz, people say, oh, Diaz can win this fight. It's because of the style matchup. There's evidence that I just showed you there where Diaz continuously loses to wrestlers. And I know Chimaev is a very well-rounded fighter, but again, you see what he did to Li Jingliang, taking him down right away. You could see a similar thing happen here against Nate Diaz. Okay, we're not finished with Diaz though. Still more to talk about here. Diaz has had a number of layoffs here. He was actually pretty active when he made his UFC debut back in 2007. You'll see there, at least twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year. But basically, once he hit the RDA fight, which was the fight that he missed weight, that's when the layoffs started happening. So going from RDA to Michael Johnson, there was a 371-day layoff. And then obviously he fought McGregor, and there was some disputes there with his contract. So that was back in 2016. He didn't fight again until 2019. This is, I think, the longest layoff I've ever had here on Early Look. He had a 1,092-day layoff between McGregor and Pettis. That was a huge layoff, but it didn't matter. He got the win in that one. Then going from Masvidal to Edwards, the BMF title fight to Edwards, there was a 588-day layoff. And then going from Edwards to Chimaev in this fight, there's a 455-day layoff. So you'll see there, Diaz very active early in his career, but later on, not so much. Ended up, having a lot of gaps. And a lot of that has to do with contracts. It's not him being injured. In fact, I went back and looked. Diaz hasn't had a single injury pullout in his UFC career other than the Leon Edwards fight that was supposed to take place in May. But that's not typical for Diaz. He's a guy that fights very active, or was very active, I should say, earlier in his career. Now, I went back and looked at some of the fights that Diaz lost by decision. I mentioned there 14 times he's gone to the judges' scorecards. If you look back on that Gray Maynard split decision fight, I went back and looked at the media scorecards for that. That was back at UFC Fight Night 20, back in January of 2010. 2 media members scored the fight for Diaz, 1 scoring it for Gray Maynard, 2 scoring it a draw, which I thought was interesting. So maybe that's a fight that could have gone Diaz's way, which was interesting. The Dong Young Kim fight as well, that was UFC 125 back in January of 2011. 3 media members scoring the fight for Kim, 4 scoring it for Nate Diaz. So again, people feeling like Diaz should have got the nod in that fight. And then, of course, the most infamous one, the rematch with Conor McGregor, which was a majority decision. Went back and looked at that. 14 media members scoring it for McGregor, 4 scoring it a draw, which I found interesting, and 1 scoring it for Diaz. So again, we go back and look at that, saying that McGregor had his number in the rematch. Clearly the media scorecards say that exact same thing, but also some feel like maybe it could have been a draw, or maybe going to Diaz. So got to point that out as well. Okay, so the odds on this fight are crazy, and just ignore the Nick Diaz thing here. I guess they still haven't updated it, but this is absolutely Khamzat against Nate Diaz, not Nick Diaz. I don't know why they haven't updated it here on Best Fight Odds, but you can see there most of the lines having Diaz as around plus 800, plus 600, plus 700. He's a huge underdog here, and Khamzat Chimaev a big favorite. You're seeing here over minus 1,000 on most of the books here overall. Okay, so I'm going to get to my pick on this fight right now. Don't think it's a huge surprise here, but I'm going Khamzat Chimaev for a variety of reasons. Number one, we talked about the fact that Khamzat Chimaev has fought at middleweight, and I've heard some people talk about the fact, he fought Gilbert Burns in his last fight. Gilbert Burns was the lightweight moving up to welterweight, and that was a close fight. I agree with that. However, Burns has had more success at welterweight than Nate Diaz has. I will argue that. And Burns has been more active. So again, I think when you're comparing Burns and Diaz, I don't really think it's fair, because Diaz has just not fought enough. And Diaz really hasn't become a mainstay at welterweight. I guess the last couple of fights he has, but Burns has fought more in the weight class. I believe he has. I might be wrong about that. But either way, Burns is more of a welterweight, I think, than Nate Diaz is, although I don't think Diaz could make 155 yet. But the fact that Chimaev has had success at 185 has to make you think that he's stronger in this situation. In fact, I remember talking to Li Jingliang. He mentioned just how strong Chimaev was in that fight, and he's a pretty strong welterweight too. So that's one thing to keep in mind as well. The strength advantage going to Chimaev as well. Another thing I mentioned there, the wrestlers. I mean, Chimaev, he has that in his back pocket. He could stand and trade with Diaz and it could get interesting, but he's got the wrestling in his back pocket here. Yeah, I mean, you saw what he did to Li Jingliang. Don't be surprised if within the first couple seconds he just takes Diaz down and tries to ground and pound him. Now, Diaz is very good off his back. He's got submissions. We saw that against McGregor here. But I just wonder with a guy that is this top heavy in Chimaev, is he's able to do that? I think that's a big if, relying on Nate Diaz to potentially get a submission here. The other argument I've heard as far as Diaz believers is that Diaz has good cardio. He does have good cardio. And this is the first 5-round fight for Chimaev, but I just think the strength for Chimaev is going to be such a difference. He's got knockout power. Diaz has knockout power too, but it's more volume knockout. Chimaev has got that one-punch knockout power that we saw against Gerald Meerschaert and other fighters that he's competed against. Chimaev's good on the ground. Chimaev's got good wrestling. Chimaev's got good grappling. You kind of see where I'm going with this here. I would be shocked if Nate Diaz won this fight. Again, I think it would have to be a situation where Chimaev either gets injured or Chimaev gets tired, but I just can't see him having that game plan. I think he's going to go in there and try and take care of business as soon as he can. All the pressure is on Chimaev here because what's awaiting him is a title shot. This is the last fight on Diaz's contract. He doesn't care, and he's lost before. It's not like the mystique of an undefeated fighter. Diaz can go in there and really, I mean, he's really got nothing to lose here. Everyone's counting him out here. And I see people making comparisons to the McGregor fight. Well, McGregor was submitted before he fought Diaz. McGregor also has had questionable cardio issues. I don't know. I know Chimaev slowed down against Burns in the third round, but again, he won that fight. It wasn't like Burns was able to capitalize there. So I got to go Khamzat Chimaev here. How does he get it done? I'm going to go 4th round stoppage. I think he lands better shots on Diaz. Diaz sort of gets worn out, kind of like the Masvidal fight where Masvidal was kind of piecing him up and then they ended up stopping the fight. I could see something similar here. Also, don't be surprised if there's a cut in this fight where, Chimaev opens him up with some elbows. That's a prop I'll be looking for actually in this fight is a, win due to a cut. I think that could happen too, but you got to like Chimaev here. Again, what separates this from the McGregor fight that I see people making comparisons to is the style matchup. Chimaev's got great wrestling, great takedowns, and he's extremely strong for the weight class. That does not bode well for Nate Diaz. If Nate Diaz was just fighting a striker, like he was fighting Masvidal again or something, maybe it's a different situation, but I just don't see a way that Chimaev loses this, and that's why I'm going with Khamzat Chimaev. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Who are you picking? If you are picking Diaz, honest to God, I want to hear your method of victory for Nate Diaz. I want to hear how you think he can get it done. Don't just say Diaz is going to win. And then if if he ends up pulling it off, you say, I told you so. I want to hear exactly how you think Diaz wins. Let's respectfully discuss this in the comments. I know we can do it. I know you guys can. I know we can have a good discussion about this. So let's hear it. Follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Lynch on Sports. Make sure you subscribe to this channel at youtube.com/Lynch on Sports. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell like I mentioned off the top. You do those 3 things. It'll help me out big time. Also, if there's any other notable fights you want me to preview, let me know. I'm going to try and do this show at least once a week. There's a ton of good fights on UFC 280 that I'll be previewing soon. There's a lot of good fights in general coming up here as I'm choking on my coffee. Really appreciate you guys tuning in here. Let me know what you think. And thank you for watching this breakdown. I'll see you next time on another edition of Early Look.